Last week of the NFL season, it's always a wacky Week 18. We're going to cover it all here on the RotoWire NFL podcast, the Friday DFS version. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Friday mornings by Ryan Belongia. If you could please rate and review the podcast, we appreciate that. We are sponsored by WynnBET. We appreciate their sponsorship all year long, too. Ryan, we're here. We've got, it's weird to say Week 18 because that's not something we've said. I think it was happened once the year they did double buys, like in 2004 or something like that. But Week 18, last week of the NFL season, people aren't playing. Most of their seasonal leagues are done. A lot of people want to jump into the DFS world this week. It's always a tough one because we got guys sitting, maybe guys leaving at halftime if they're leading, and the team's already in the playoffs, or team coaches wanted to see young guys. It's always a weird week, but we'll jump into it. But first of all, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. First wanted to give props to you about last week. That Seattle-Detroit call.
It worked out okay, didn't it?
Proved to be perfect. Yeah, I wish I would have listened, but Awesemo stacked that game and won $1 million.
I saw that.
So you were right on the money with that one. Hopefully,
he actually played. He played Wilson with Lockett, Metcalf, but also played Penny too. Like, talk about stacking that game. And you look up, and what were there? I think there were 80 points in that game, right?
Right. Yeah. Crazy. You called it. Spot on.
Hey, every once in a while, it only took 17 weeks for me to get there.
No, but hopefully we can, find somewhere to go this week. I like this week though. I feel like it's different than most weeks. There's a little bit different type of edge to be had, as you mentioned, looking at motivation and maybe some contract incentives. I feel like there's some games.
The contract incentives worked well for Antonio Brown last week.
Oof, yeah, that was that did not. I had a pretty bad week last week because of Antonio Brown. Well, not.
I didn't bring it to bring it for that reason. You just kind of you made it too easy for me there.
Yeah. But there's some contract incentives that are a bit interesting this week that we'll get into. But yeah, why don't you preview the games?
Yeah, so we've got it's obviously a big slate because there's no Thursday game, there's no Monday games. Like to keep everybody playing at the same time in terms of the teams affect each other. There are 2 Saturday games. We won't be on the main slate. That's Dallas and Philly and Kansas City at Denver. They flex those games to Saturday. And then we have a Sunday night game we won't be talking about either. That's the Raiders and the Chargers, obviously a big game. Kind of essentially a win and get in game unless something wacky happens with Jacksonville and Indy and like the Raiders and Chargers can tie. There's been a lot of talk about it on Twitter. I don't think that we're gonna have to worry about that. I don't think we have to worry about Jacksonville winning any games, but you never know. But those are the games off the slate. But that puts 13 games on the slate, 7 early, 6 late. We got good chunks on both sides here. How do you generally deal with Week 18? Like we've got motivation. We've got guys sitting. The Bengals have already said they're going to sit Joe Mixon, Joe Burrow. We don't know about the receivers, but obviously their stock goes way, way down. Jamar Chase coming off his monster games. He's had a great season, set some records, but if Joe Burrow's not going to play, how much do you want to touch their receivers? The real hard part is guys leaving games early. Like we've got teams like the Packers have clinched the 1 seed, but it sounds like they're playing guys. How long are they going to play them for? The Bills win the AFC, the AFC East with a win. If they get up 28-3, do they yank everybody? So it's just like, how do you deal with like the teams? Like obviously with Cincinnati's easy. We know they're not playing. Like that's easy for us to kind of analyze and figure out. How do you deal with these in-between teams where like if they do get ahead, this is a week where normally, maybe they don't throw as much in the fourth quarter, but now, Josh Allen may not play the whole fourth quarter.
Yeah. For the most part, I want to avoid all those situations. As far as how I deal with the week overall, I think I'm going to be less concerned with stacking games. Just because, well, for one, we don't have many high totals, but also we don't have many games where both teams are actually playing for something. So I'd rather just, I guess, stack teams that have motivation to play all four quarters. Teams that are going all out. Like as far as teams like the Packers, going to have no interest in Rodgers or Adams. I mean, regardless of what they say, you can't see those guys playing past halftime.
Right.
The Bills, that's a risky one too. they should handle the Jets. They need that game to win the division, but you can see them resting guys too.
Yeah. But then the Jets score 14 points kind of randomly, and Josh Allen's got to stay in longer. So it's a weird little seesaw play of like you've got to. This is a week where you really have to like project how the game's going to go. In addition to figure out, normally we always do that anyway, but like this is a big week for that because guys, they just may bail early.
Yeah, exactly what you said. I'm going to try to focus on the spots where I'm most confident on and avoid the ones that have uncertainty, I guess. I feel like there'll be more mistakes made this week than most weeks. And yeah, I think we can capitalize on that.
So you mentioned, let's jump into the games. You mentioned the lot, not a lot of low totals. You downplayed that. There's one game on the slate that's over 45. Like it's a weird place in the NFL this year. Like I never thought we'd get back to the point where like, games in the mid 50s were considering high totals. Consider what we had the last couple of years. That game is Seattle at Arizona. Depending on your book, it's 47.5. It's 48 somewhere in there. There's no other games over 45. I'm going to talk about the games that are like 44-ish. Those are the new high totals this week. We've got Green Bay at Detroit, Chicago at Minnesota, Indy at Jacksonville, San Francisco at LA. Those are all like either 44, 44.5, right in that range. I tell you what, this is a week where you've got it. Like last week, you talked about Seattle, Detroit. Like that was 42, but went to 80. Like you got to find some games you are going to be scoring. It doesn't have to be as, like you said, a stack back and forth. But you got to find some teams you need to score some points this week.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, as far as games where both teams are playing for something, do we have anything besides, I see the 49ers aren't in yet, and the Rams, if they win, they can get the 2 seed, and if they lose, they can get the 5 seed.
Yeah.
So that game seems pretty important for both teams. Other than that, I don't know. Is that the only one where both teams are really playing for something?
It depends how much you want to squint, because I think Ravens Steelers both need to win, but they both need to get help to get in. So it's not like a win and get in, but they both need to win just in case other wackies. I think the Steelers are like two different things in that. Like they're both pretty long odds, but I would assume that both those teams at least play pretty hard the first 3 quarters and kind of what's going on the scoreboard. But you're right. There's not a lot of games where like they're both winning in, aside from obviously Raiders Chargers not on the slate. But there aren't a lot of games where it's a playoff game between the two teams. Like 49ers Rams kind of is, because the Rams definitely want that home field for the first round.
Yeah, that Steelers Ravens game, you're right, could be interesting. I see the Steelers can still get in with a win and a Colts loss, and the Ravens need a lot of help. They would need a Chargers, Colts, and Dolphins all to lose. But
you're right. I had it backwards. I thought the Steelers needed more help, but you're right. But I mean, like it's funny because if they look up and the Colts are up 28-0 at halftime, like that suddenly is not as fun to spot too.
It's also like that, Big Ben's last game, right?
Yep.
So the Steelers him and the Steelers should be playing all game regardless. That's a rivalry game too. Steelers and the Ravens. So. And
at some level, like it's the NFL players, like competitiveness does take over. Like these guys want to win their last games. A lot of coaches, maybe need to win their last game, maybe need to get over 500. Like there's a lot of other things. Here's the NFL. Teams want to win these games. And once you kind of blow the whistle and get going, you're going to see pretty good effort from both sides. It's just those spots where, like, if they look up at the scoreboard and they're obviously out of the playoffs and everybody knows it, you just wonder how much they, pull back, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So some of the other teams then, I guess, the Titans need a win and they can clinch the number 1 seed and a bye. So
huge. I mean, with only one bye, that's huge.
Yeah. Really big game for the Titans. As far as the NFC, we mentioned the Rams. The Rams have a lot to play for. The Bucs is an interesting one. They clinched the division. They can finish as high as 2, or as low as 4. So I'm not sure what the Bucs are going to do. That's sort of a weird one.
Yeah.
And the Cardinals Seahawks game, the game with our, quote unquote high total, the 48 total that stands out. The Cardinals still have a lot to play for too. So I could see that game with the Seahawks, being a pretty popular target, especially considering what the Seahawks did last week, and considering that the Cardinals looked a lot better too, beating the Cowboys. So I think that'll be a game people look to as well.
Yeah, and that's one of those ones like you figure at least Vegas wise, the Niners-Rams game should at least be close for a while. We talked about some of these other games like they need them to lose, but it's Jaguars-Colts. But the Cardinals look at the scoreboard and the Niners are the Niners and Rams are tied at halftime. Like that's gonna be a full game for them. So that's it's big to like not only need to know what they know, but like how that other game goes. There's a lot of twists and turns this week, but at least we don't have a ton of teams that are sitting guys. We've got Cincinnati. Green Bay's kind of clinched the one and can't do anything. They said they're going to play guys because they don't want to sit guys for 3 weeks because essentially they have the bye. If they sit someone now, it's 3 weeks between games. But I don't think that I can trust those guys to play the fourth quarters. But we do have some really low totals this week. Obviously, not surprising because there's not a lot of high totals. We've got New England, Miami 39.5, the Jets and Buffalo 41, Carolina, Tampa 41.5. Washington and the Jets, 38.5. Pittsburgh, Baltimore's 42, so maybe not that bad there. And then Cincy and Cleveland with the guys sitting. Baker Mayfield's not playing for Cleveland. That total's 38. 3 games under 40, I think sets a new record for us. It's gonna be a weird week of offense this week.
Yeah, and 3 games under 40. A lot of games hovering, right around 40, 41. Yeah. The one other one I see, Saints Falcons. That game only has a 40 total, but the Saints are also playing for a playoff spot still. If they win and the Niners lose, they're in. So
let's not put that scenario out in the world.
Yeah, no. We don't want the Niners to lose, but the Saints have plenty of motivation this week too, so that might be an okay spot to look at.
Yeah, I actually like some of the Saints players this week. I think Atlanta's just so bad, and that's a pretty good spot. Although you mentioned that the total's low, but a lot of that's because Atlanta can't do much right now. But yeah, it's an interesting week. I found myself. We always talk about like crossing off games, then we end up talking about players. There's a couple games this week I just flat out crossed off. I just flipped through it. I'm like, oh, I don't really want anybody in this game. I just kind of moved on. Like I think Cincy and Cleveland was one of those. Maybe 1 or 2 guys here and there. Maybe some subs for Cincy that maybe are low price, but like that New England and Miami were the 2 games I was like, oh, this is just kind of gross.
Yeah, I'd be okay with crossing both those games off. Yeah. Cincinnati, Cleveland. Yeah, I don't even think I'd have any interest playing even the backups. I mean, it's too hard to predict. So the defenses in that game might be okay.
Yeah, that's true. That's true too. Yeah, I meant offensive players, but I always go game by game as I'm prepping for this, and I think Cincy Cleveland was the fastest I've done in games since we started doing this at the start of the year. I think that was the game. I flipped through it. I'm like, all right, we're good.
I'm glad you brought that up, though. Like Nick Chubb, for instance, it might look like a good spot on paper, but that game against Pittsburgh the other night that was very weird. Chubb was barely even in there. I think he busted off like a 32-yard run right away.
First series, I was like, oh, here we go. It's going to be a good game. Teams have been owning Pittsburgh, and then all of a sudden, every time I looked up, Chubb wasn't in the game. It was maddening.
Yeah, so they
have nothing to play for. Baker's not playing. Like, I don't know why they would bother giving him 28 carries. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
But we see weird things in Week 18. But that was a spot where I was like, for the price, very rare. I don't say I'm playing Nick Chubb, but I want no part of Chubb this week.
Yeah, and I want no part of any situation where that might happen. That's why this is a weird week. Like,
it is.
I know jumping around a little bit, but like something that looks a bit similar to that, or at least could be. I was interested to get your take. Is Dalvin Cook and the Vikings? You could. Him and Jefferson are in great spots. They're decent salaries too, but I'm just not convinced that these guys that are playing for teams with nothing to play for are going to be out there in the fourth quarter. Could be wrong. It could be just a complete smash spot, all out last game, rack up the stats, but I don't know. There's a lot of risk to these teams that don't have anything to play for.
There are, and weirdly, like in games like that, like I like the passing game there, but on Dalvin Cook, I'm kind of off. You just wonder, like you just wonder if you feed a running back like that when there's nothing going on in the fourth quarter. Like maybe they want to win. Maybe Mike Zimmer's kind of maybe fighting for his job. I kind of think he's done anyway. But maybe they play hard for him. Maybe they don't like him. Maybe they don't play hard for him. I don't know that. But I tend to like that passing game. Like I like Cousins and Jefferson, and we'll talk about stacks a little bit later. But yeah, Cook at 7,800 on DraftKings. Brutal last week. Horrible against Green Bay. Lost a lot of teams. They relied on him. Their season-long championship. He was 9 for 13. He had 3 catches for 0 yards. If you look at Cook, he had that one huge game against Pittsburgh. We talk about Pittsburgh can't stop the run. That's his only game over 100 yards since week 9. So it's just like I think he's been banged up a little bit. That situation where like I wouldn't be shocked if he gets like 12 carries or something like that.
No, yeah, I think you're right. I wanted to bring it up because
Yeah.
I was surprised to see. I was surprised actually. I see him with a pretty high projection on a few sites, and it surprised me. And I even see him with a pretty high rostership projection too. Obviously, it's early Friday. That stuff changes, but yeah, it was surprising. And I'm more on your side, where it's a situation I want to avoid, I think.
So let's talk about a couple of guys that we do think will be popular. I think projections and rostership is more spread out this week than most. We got a lot of games. We got a lot of different people are thinking different ways in these games. But looking at quarterback, is there a quarterback on the expensive side need to be popular? I mean, I think it's going to be Kyler Murray. We talked a lot. I haven't liked Kyler Murray a lot in the second half, but I really like Murray in this spot against the Seahawks. Got to win, assuming they're going to watch the Rams game, but hasn't been huge lately, but looked pretty good last week. He looked better than he has in a while. He had 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, and ran the ball 9 times, which is a good time. Like, he was only 44 yards, but you'd like to see the fact he's running the ball out, coming off that injury from a couple months ago. Should play to win at least early. Seattle is 27th in passing points per game against. Even Colt McCoy smoked them the first time these teams played. I like that spot. Josh Allen is also up here. Tough for me to figure how much he's going to play, but obviously the matchup against the Jets is really good.
Yep, I agree. Kyler would be my number one in this top range. It's nice to see him running the ball more. He's looked better throwing the ball. He's looked quick running the ball. The Cardinals need to win. Cardinals look better. Yeah, and just none of these other options, like, Rodgers, we're not going to play him in the Packers. Burrow's out. Lamar's probably out. Don't really want to play Brady. Who knows what Tampa's going to do. Josh Allen, yeah, he's playable. Like you said, if the Jets can score some points, Allen always has 40 fantasy points in him. But you're going to need him playing into the fourth quarter, most likely. There's a really good chance that game's over by the third quarter. But he's worth taking a shot on for tournaments if you want to do that. I probably won't. I agree with you. Kyler is where I would go at the top. Other than that, I'm not interested.
Off the top, do you think that Taysom Hill is the most popular guy, kind of in the cheap range? He's 6,200. Always that nice floor with the rushing, a nice matchup here against Atlanta. Atlanta's not stopping anybody. 17 for 28, 222 and a touchdown last week. So threw the ball decently well. Didn't score on the ground, but it was 12 for 45, so still kind of had the rush yards. As I look at like projections and rostership guesses and all that, it seemed like Hill at 6,200 on DraftKings was a pretty popular play this week.
Yeah, seems like it to me too. Just makes sense. It's a really good spot against Atlanta. Saints, win and they can still get in the playoffs. So yeah, I think Taysom will be popular both in cash games and tournaments. I think for $500 cheaper, Tyler Huntley will also be decently popular.
Yeah,
pretty good matchup at home against Pittsburgh, and he's a similar, at least from a fantasy perspective, similar to what Taysom does. He's running a lot, making plays with both his feet and his arm. So yeah, I think people will go to Taysom and Huntley mostly in that cheap range, at least for cash games. Tournaments, I don't know. Those guys will be popular too, but there's a lot of guys to take a chance on, I guess.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some stacks and stuff. If Jimmy Garoppolo does not play, do you think Trey Lance joins the Hill, Huntley kind of playing that range, running quarterback range, or do you think the matchup against the Rams you scare people off them a little bit?
Yeah, I think if we didn't have those other guys, Lance would be relatively popular again.
And he was a questionable holding call away from 3 touchdowns last week. He had 2 passing, 1 rushing. It was really scary in the first half. They didn't score They didn't score a touchdown in the first half, but got it going in the second half. You kind of see you could see the upside kind of bubbling the surface there. I think Garoppolo is actually going to play, so it might be a moot point. But if he doesn't, I think it's in a game that could be a little back and forth. I think he'd be right there for me with those guys too.
I think he'd be right there for me too. Yeah, I heard multiple people complaining, that the people that rostered Lance got bailed out. We got so lucky with those fourth quarter touchdowns, and all I was thinking was, you guys got lucky that he didn't get that rushing touchdown.
They had 7 yards per play for the whole game. Like they didn't score the first half, but they scored 3. But like they didn't score any touchdowns, but they were moving the ball. It's just like they made some mistakes. They got some penalties. He made a bad throw, like whatever it is. But like, the game could have been a lot bigger. You mentioned you're right. The rushing touchdown. Suddenly it's a 3 touchdown game. People are like, oh my god, that was the easiest chalk ever. But I wouldn't. He had the late touchdown, the long touchdown at Debo in the fourth quarter, but. I wouldn't call that. I kind of think he landed probably where he was probably supposed to.
Yeah, me too. But back to your point, I'm with you. If Jimmy doesn't start, it's a spot where San Fran needs the game. And yeah, I don't think Lance would be nearly as popular as those other guys. I'd be willing to go there.
I might need Jimmy to be inactive. Like if he was like active, but they were thinking about it. If Trey starts badly, maybe they bring him in. I would concern me a little bit. But if Jimmy's like not playing and the thumb, the hand stuff is not going to work, then I think Lance becomes very playable.
Yeah, and the Niners just smoked the Rams last game.
And they've won 5 in a row. They have owned them. I think the Rams are going to come out really pissed off. I think it's going to be tough. We'll talk about that game in a second. We've got a lot of the Niners have a lot of guys that are out on COVID right now. We don't know if they're going to clear in the secondary, but it's I think the Rams are pretty tired about hearing how Shanahan owns McVay. I think it's going to be a tough one. What about running back in popularity? I mean, the guy that jumps off the page in a huge way this week is Jonathan Taylor, 9,300. So he's very expensive. He is priced like the stud he is, but playing Jacksonville in a game the Colts have to win. He has 20-plus touches in every game last 8 weeks. He was 20 for 108 last week against the Raiders, 21 for 116 against the same Jags team in Week 10. Great matchup, great game script. They should feed him. It's a matter of, if they do get up, at some point they'll sit him. But the spot is pretty darn good for Jonathan Taylor this week. I imagine a lot of people are going to start their lineups with him.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Me too, probably. I want as much Taylor exposure as I can get this week. It's such a good spot. He feels like he's guaranteed for at least 100 yards and at least one score, with upside for, he's 266 yards away from 2,000.
I figured you were going there.
That's a tall order, but 3 touchdowns is in the cards here in such a good matchup with the Colts needing to win. So yeah, 9,300 is a big price tag, but I'm going to try to roster Taylor for sure. Yeah,
we always say if they're up 31-0, maybe they'll sit him. But if they're up 31-0, he probably has done some eating himself. So it's probably if they're way up, it's probably a good amount of him involved. So yeah, I think he's going to be a lot of like cornerstones for lineups, even at the price. The other guy who I think would be popular off the huge Monday night game is Najee Harris. He's a bit underpriced week at 7,200 because that he went off on Monday night and that is not factored in. The pricing was already out. He was 28 for $188 and a touchdown. He finally looked like the guy that like we expected coming out from Alabama. I thought it was the best he looked, at least from an eye test. Obviously, the yards were huge, the line was huge, but he was breaking tackles. He looked really good. Last 6 weeks have been really up and down. He's been over 90 yards 3 times, under 25 twice. So like some really stinker games in there. But he leads the NFL in touches. Deontay Johnson, I believe, is confirmed out. So we've got last time Deontay didn't play, Najee got 19 targets. So we got the pass game in there too. Do you think Najee's gonna be pretty popular at 7,200?
Yeah, I do. So I wanted to just fade. So I wanted to just fade him.
Okay.
Because, well, first of all, his game last week against Cleveland quit. I mean, it was kind of a joke watching that game to me. I mean, the Steelers line is still not good, and the Ravens have a good run defense. It's still tough to run against the Ravens. Now, I say I want to fade him, but Deontay Johnson being out definitely adds some receiving upside for Harris. And 7,200 is a pretty good salary. So yeah, I can get behind it. But I am worried about the rushing. Like, I don't think it's a great spot for rushing, but he, like you mentioned, I don't know how many targets last game with Deontay. Did you say 19 or something?
I said 19. I think that's right. I can go look it up.
I believe it was right. Yeah. 19. I mean, if he's going to see 10 plus targets, I mean, he's a great play.
And in no way I'm saying he's going to see 19, but like Ben doesn't throw the ball more than 5 yards no matter who's out there. So it's just like if Deontay is a security blanket, it's not there. Like I don't know. You could see 8 to 10 targets pretty easily in this game.
Yeah, I can too. So I definitely understand that play. Now, I'm kind of hoping in Ben's last game that he might try to air it out a little bit more. There's some receivers on Pittsburgh that we'll get to, which is another reason why I kind of want to just avoid Harris and maybe hope the receivers can do it. But Harris makes a lot of sense too.
I think receivers pretty wide open this week. We'll kind of save a lot of those when we're talking about tournaments and stacks. But Cooper Kupp is 9,700, and it's just unbelievable how much he delivers every single week. He only had 7 targets last week, but turned that into 6 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown. He's only had under double digits once all year. Before that, it was 9 targets in midseason. He needs that. You're talking about records and milestones. He needs 12 catches for the all-time single season record. I fully understand they played an extra game. Don't at me on that one. I get that there's maybe some asterisks there, but it's still a record. He needs 136 yards for the all-time single season receiving record. Got to think, they need to win this game, so they're going to run their game plan, but that's going to be a lot of Cooper Kupp. But if they get to the point where they're up, maybe they try and get him that record. He's good every week. The Niners secondary is absolutely devastated by COVID right now. I don't know if guys are going to clear. There's Ambry Thomas. There's Jimmy Ward. There's 2 other names in there, and it's blanking at the moment. But Lenore, their rookie, is out too. But if all those guys clear, then we're kind of okay. If Emmanuel Mosley, who's been hurt all year, plays, maybe a little different. But the Niners secondary is bad as it was, and now kind of devastated by these guys potentially missing the game. Kupp is 9,700. It's really hard to play him and Taylor, so maybe that keeps it down a little bit. But do you find yourself wanting to kind of force Kupp into the lineups this week, or are you going to go lower down at receiver?
Yeah, I do want to force Kupp into some lineups. Everything you said, it's a great spot against that banged up Niners secondary, and you feel like Kupp's going to go for this record, both those records. They've been talking about it publicly. 12 catches for 136 yards. That's 28 fantasy points right there, even if he doesn't score a touchdown. 9,700. It's the most expensive we've seen any position player all season. I'm kind of hoping that keeps some people off of him because I definitely want to roster Kupp. Yeah, it seems like, on a week where there's not many sure spots or spots you can be super confident in, Kupp is one of them, and he could have a huge game in this spot and going for those records. It all lines up. Plenty of motivation for the Rams. I definitely want Kupp.
I can't argue with any of that, and obviously, receivers against the Niners have been a spot that I like. But I think the fact that Taylor's there at that price maybe keeps both of them down a little bit. If it was just one of them was off the slate, I think everybody would have them. I think people have to split those a little bit. There will be some lineups that try and force both in, but I think most of them will kind of build with one of those 2.
Yep, I think you're right.
Let's get into some tournaments and stacking talk. But first, a note from our sponsors at WynnBET. There's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire. It's making good decisions, and even more so making the right decision. Listen up. I have an incredible offer for you with RotoWire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's Fantasy Podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more all at your fingertips. Want to break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down in blackjack, slam the slots, try hand it back around. WynnBET is currently available in 7 states. We have a state added since we read last week. Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, all while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's Fantasy Podcasts. So before we get into passing stacks, Ryan, I want to do a quick little segment here. I want to talk about, we'll call them Week 18 heroes. And Week 18 is always an interesting week in the NFL. We always got some guys who kind of step up out of nowhere, win weeks for people. Usually it's people in season-long leagues are like, oh, my God, I had that guy all year. He didn't do anything, and now he went huge. I think last year was Alvin Kamara, had like 3 or 4 touchdowns. That might have been Week 17, but I remember I was in the Scott Fish Bowl, and I had Kamara, and I would have won it but Kamara, I was out a week early. I was in the semifinals, and then Kamara had, it was 4 or 5 touchdowns that second week. But there's always guys late in the year that go off. I want to talk about a couple guys. It can be off the radar guys. It can be guys that studs that kind of haven't stepped up all year, but I want to take a couple guys each, guys you think are going to be like league winning, tournament winning picks this week that maybe a little bit off the radar.
Okay, sure. Try to name a couple guys at a couple different positions. So let's start on the Steelers since we were just there. Deontay Johnson being out frees up, 13, 14, 15 targets for some of these receivers. It's Big Ben's last game. He's already throwing the ball 40 times. This guy, Chase Claypool, 5,100. It's the cheapest he's been all season on a Sunday slate. I mean, we've seen him priced over $6K for most of the season. He hasn't really done much. This is a spot where he should see 10 plus targets, you'd think. Maybe Ben takes some deep shots, maybe some more chances with it being his last game. Claypool could definitely catch a long touchdown here. Staying on the Steelers, Ray McLeod is only 3,800. He's seen 10 targets and 8 targets with Deontay Johnson active the last 2 weeks. I could see him sort of stepping into the role of Ben's favorite receiver. He's really cheap for that role, so I could see him going off. Moving over to running back, the Titans need to win to secure the bye and the number 1 seed. Derrick Henry is getting closer to healthy and ready for the playoffs. So I think it makes all the sense in the world for them to just pound Dante Foreman here. Could see, he had 26 carries last week for 132 yards. He looked really good. Could see 30 carries in this spot against the Texans. It's a really nice spot for him. Similar spot for Devin Singletary. Not a guy that I or most people have loved rostering, but you give me any running back in the NFL for 6,000 in a matchup against the Jets and tell me he's going to see 20 plus touches. Really don't care what his name is. That's a pretty good spot. Could have a huge game. And then a tight end. So the Buccaneers aren't, people are pretty much off the Bucs in this spot. It's tough to really know what they're going to do. However, I think taking a chance on Gronkowski could pay off because he's got a couple of big incentives. He needs 7 catches for a $500,000 bonus, and he needs 85 yards for a $500,000 bonus. So that's $1 million, and you figure he knows this. Brady knows this. They don't have Godwin anymore. There's no Antonio Brown anymore. It lines up for Gronk to have a big game if they're going to play. It's tough to know if they'll be out there all game, but it might be worth taking a shot on. And then I guess I'll stick in that game just one other guy. I know I'm naming a lot of guys here, but if the Bucs maybe do rest Evans and Gronk a little bit, Cyril Grayson stepped into the Godwin Antonio Brown role. He caught 6 balls for 81 yards last week. He could see similar volume this week. He's a speedster. He's got some big playability. You got Tom Brady as your quarterback, and he's only 4,400. So he could do it too. I hope I left you a few guys to name. I sort of rattled off a lot of guys, but
no, that's good. Those are all names that like guys that we don't really normally think about. I mean, I like a lot of those plays. You actually stole my running back. It was going to be Dante Foreman for me too. He's 5,700 against Houston. And just to build on that, you mentioned the game last week. I mean, Houston is 32nd in the NFL in yards per carry, given up at 4.9. They're 31st in rushing points against. He's a guy that you do need the good game script. Like if they get behind for some reason or it's a close game, maybe not as much. But if they get ahead, I think you're right. I think they feed the heck out of Foreman. I love this game for him. 5,700 is really a workable price. Great matchup, great game script. As long as they get ahead, I think you're going to see a lot of Dante Foreman. I think he's a guy that, could be, $120 and 2 touchdown kind of thing. So you stole a couple of my names. I'm going to stick with a couple other receivers, guys that I think are really going to step up this week. The first is a guy who's way off the radar right now, has not stepped up. It was a 2nd or 3rd round pick earlier. Is Terry McLaurin in Washington. He's 6,200 for the price. That is a insane talent. I know it's been bad. Last week he did have 8 targets, though, 7 for 61. Hasn't 100 yards or a touchdown since week 11. Struggling, but this matchup against the Giants, I like this. He had a $107 and a touchdown against them in week 2. I think, Taylor Heineke's kind of weirdly playing for not only a job next year, but maybe like to get some tape and show some stuff for other teams. I think he's going to come out throwing. This is a big game for him personally. He's kind of on that edge right now, what they want to do with him. And I think the teams are still a little suspect on him. So I think a big game for Heineke might actually mean something for him going in the offseason. So I really like players with motivation like that. I think he's going to chuck it a few times up. I just need to hit on one of those big plays. And I think McLaurin could have a really big game. My other guy in this range, a little bit lower at 5,000. I think a lot of people are going to agree with you on Claypool. I think he's going to be pretty popular with Deontay Johnson out. I really like Marquez Callaway this week against Atlanta. We talked about Taysom Hill earlier. Callaway was really strong last week. Taysom Hill doesn't throw well a ton, but he had 10 targets last week, 6 for 97. He now has 24 targets the last 3 weeks. So the guy that earlier in the year, everybody loved Marquez Callaway. He's like the breakout guy. He had a really big preseason to make some big plays. Has not worked out, did not work out for people, but 95 yards in 2 of his last 3 games. He has 30% of New Orleans passing targets last month. So, like, he is the guy right now. They have Traquan Smith, they have Alvin Kamara, but, like, when they drop back to pass, it seems like Taysom Hill likes to go to Marquez Callaway. So I really like there's a spot that I think he go over 100 yards. He could score. I don't think he'd be all that popular. I don't think people really want to attack the New Orleans passing game. So McLaurin, Callaway, I agree with you on Foreman. Those are my Week 18 heroes.
Yeah, I really like both those calls actually at receiver, and those are guys that aren't going to be nearly as popular as Claypool or some of the other guys we'll talk about. Definitely guys that can win you a tournament.
So let's talk about some stacks. What in terms of I'm going to go this as my main stack. What are you doing in terms of a quarterback receiver stack? Who are you looking to really kind of focus and get your core going with?
That's a good question. So the games that I'm most, the only 2 games that I really want to stack, I don't know, it's tough. I don't really want to stack games other than, Kyler, Arizona and Seattle, or maybe the Rams and San Fran.
It's funny. Those are the exact 2 that I have here too.
So, and the reason I'm kind of hesitant is because, so I don't really want to roster Stafford, but you can. I get it. That San Fran's secondary is really banged up, and pairing him with Kupp makes sense. But I'm not sure, who you run it back with. I guess my point is I'm not really focused so much on stacks. If I'm going to be rostering a QB like Taysom Hill or Tyler Huntley, or maybe Trey Lance if he goes, or even Kyler Murray, these are all running quarterbacks who, I'm not necessarily worried about stacking them up or running it back. I more so just want to stack teams and players that have motivation. So let me throw it back to you, Scott, and you give a better answer about game stacks that look good to you.
Yeah, I mean, mine is Arizona. It's chalky, but I love Kyler this week, and I've been someone who has not liked Kyler a lot the second half of the year, but I really like him with Christian Kirk. Kyler's 7,400, Kirk is 6,000. Kirk has kind of stepped up as that guy with DeAndre Hopkins out. 6 for 97, 9 targets last week. He's averaging over 8 targets a game over the last 6 games. So he's getting the ball a ton. A talented guy. Hasn't had a lot of upside with those targets though. He has no 100-yard game since week 3. He has 1 touchdown since week 8. But I like this spot. They're gonna have to score a little bit. I think Seattle, has shown last week their offense is back a little bit. And they got to win this game, and Seattle's pass offense is bad. So I do like this spot a lot for Kyler and Kirk. I think that Antoine Wesley is also interesting too. He's 4,100. The other wide receiver for Arizona, he scored twice in the last 2 weeks. He's had a touchdown game and a 2 touchdown game. Not a lot of yards, but you look at the snaps: 64, 50, and 43 last week. He's playing a lot. 16 targets the last 3 weeks. Just the price tag here. He's 4,100. I think a lot of people, Ray McLeod, you mentioned earlier, he'd probably be popular at 3,800. Some other guys are cheap, but if you wanted to stack Murray with someone cheaper than Kirk, I think Wesley works at 4,100. And then, coming back, you can go with I like Lockett a lot this week more than Metcalf, just the way the Arizona guards, they're better on the outside than they are against slot receivers. So, Metcalf had a 3 touchdown game last week. Maybe just jump back the other way. I like Lockett at 6,400. So I think he's an easy comeback there. The Rams are tough. Like you mentioned, it looks easy. You're like, well, the Niners can't guard anybody. They're all out with COVID right now. We'll see if they come back. But Stafford has been rough. Stafford's thrown a lot of pick sixes. He just hasn't looked comfortable. The Niners played the Rams really well earlier this year. Stafford had 1 touchdown and 2 picks. But like, I think that McVay's got to be like, we got to attack these on the outside. I think that coaches don't attack the Niners cornerbacks on the outside enough. Like you watch the Cincinnati game, you and I talked about, like in the fourth quarter when Cincy was down, like Burrow and Chase just went nuts because it was so easy, but they didn't do it in the first 3 quarters. I have to think the McVay attacks early. I think you could stack Stafford with Kupp. You can afford it, but I think you go Beckham too. Beckham's 5,800. I think he's in a good matchup here where like Kupp's going to be in the middle. Beckham's on the outside a little bit. I don't think they can cover him. He's 4,000 cheaper than Kupp. He has a touchdown in 5 of his last 6 games. He hasn't done a lot of yardage work. He hasn't topped 85 yards all year, but 15 targets last week. Van Jefferson played a little bit less last week. Maybe they're really seeing Beckham as clearly the 2 where they're kind of 2A and 2B. So I think Beckham's workable at 5,800, and I just don't know if the Niners can cover him right now.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I just wanted to jump quickly back to Arizona. I like Kirk like you do. I feel like he's been a little bit unlucky not to have a bigger game. Kyler's target him on a couple deep balls. But Ertz, tight end, he looks like, one of the better tight ends on the slate. He's, 9 targets, 13 targets, 11 targets, and still like an affordable price. And then AJ Green is like an interesting one. He's a guy that has 75 yards away from a $250K bonus.
Oh, wow. All right. Nice.
So that's something. I mean, don't love rostering AJ Green, but he's caught a deep ball in just about all these games recently. 42-yarder, 33-yarder, 36-yarder, 31-yarder. So I mean, there's big play upside there. I just wanted to throw that out there. But I agree, like this Wesley guy, he looked pretty good last week, and he's been seeing targets.
No, I agree with you on Ertz. He's probably I have him bolded when we talk about tight ends. I should have thrown him in the stack there too. I think that's he's just seen a ton of targets, and maybe they're not deep targets, but in PPR, like DraftKings is, you get a bunch of targets. That'll really work nicely. The last one I want to talk about, we mentioned a little bit earlier about Minnesota. I do kind of like, if you want to be a little sneakier, I think that Cousins and Jefferson works well. The Bears are 25th in yards per attempt. They're dead last in touchdown rate to quarterbacks. So this is a pretty good matchup. Cousins had multiple touchdowns in 7 straight weeks before week 16. In week 16, he even had 315 and a touchdown. So he's been pretty decent. Like, he hasn't hurt you. He's been a pretty good floor. I get he didn't play last week. There's a lot of controversy about that. My only concern here is he was so bad against Chicago a few weeks ago. He had 87 yards passing. It was a weird game. It was a Monday night game. It was a strange game, but I think that it's a workable combo here. Jefferson's 8,100. I think with Kupp, they are so expensive. I don't think a lot of people are going to have Jefferson. But he had 11 targets last week, even without Kirk Cousins. They were not great targets. There was an ugly game with Sean Mannion, but double-digit targets the last 5 weeks, 7 of the last 8. He had 10 targets against the Bears. Last game, he only had 47 yards. But I think he's a spot, like, I don't think that's going to be popular at all. I think you got to get away with that stack, and maybe, especially in a tournament. I wouldn't play that in a cash game, but in a tournament, I think Cousins Jefferson's kind of a fun way to go. Yeah,
I can definitely get behind that one. 8,100 seems actually like a really good price for Jefferson if the Vikings are gonna, be all out. If those guys are playing into the fourth quarter, which I'd assume they will. I saw some stuff about. This is still sort of an audition for Cousins, and yeah, that Monday night game against the Bears sticks out in my mind too.
It does. Yeah.
That's a bit worrying, but on the Bears side, like, you can run it back with some guys too. Like Comet projects as one of the better cheap tight ends. Allen Robinson's back now. He's only 4K. He had 6 targets last week.
Allen Robinson should be 4K, by the way. Ugh.
Yeah.
What a season though, from a guy that was like a second, third round draft pick. One of the bigger busts this year.
Yeah, I agree. I guess that I'm more. I guess I feel a little bit better about rostering him or Bears pass catchers with Andy Dalton.
He certainly fits that. Oh, he screwed me all year, and here's the 2 touchdown week 18 game though. That's a nice play. I like it.
You can at least like see him completing, 25 passes or so,
yeah.
and they got to go to somebody. And with the exception of Jefferson, everyone's cheap in that game. Well, I guess also if you want to run it back on Chicago, you can play David Montgomery, who projects as one of the better running backs. So yeah, I like that game for stacking. I'm definitely going to consider that one.
Yeah, me too. Also, let's talk about some running backs and receivers. But first, a note from our sponsors at HOFR. This episode of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Cast is brought to you by HOFR, Daily Fantasy Sports Redefined. No confusing salary caps, no annoying player drafts, just simple multiple choice questions on the slate, on the stats you know, and the slate you know, and the players you love. That's right. The majority of HOFR contests focus on single sporting events and only feature questions about popular players and recognizable stats, allowing users to make their picks confidently and quickly. Plus, you can never play against the house or versus those fantasy sharks. The playing field is level for even the most amateur user to find him or herself landing in the money. Unlike those other apps where an incorrect answer can end your night, on HOFR, incorrect answers never eliminate you from the competition. I played the other night. The questions were as simple as how many touchdowns will Tom Brady throw and which player will have the most rushing yards. So make your NFL Sunday picks with confidence and ease on HOFR. So do not wait another second. Download HOFR. That's HOFR from the Apple App Store or Google Play Store right now. HOFR, everything the fantasy sports world has been waiting for. So let's talk about some like kind of mid-range running backs. We talked a lot about receivers and stacks and popular guys and all that. In the mid-range, there's a lot of guys in this range. Rashad Penny last week went crazy again. That's 3 out of 4 weeks that have been huge. I think he'll be fairly popular. He's 6,500 going against Arizona. We talked about the Seattle-Arizona game is one that, the only one that has a total over 45. So I think he's interesting. You mentioned David Montgomery. He's 6,800. Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson, like the New England running back is kind of like one spot here. Damian Harris lit in practice the last couple of days. Like if Stevenson was the guy at 5,900, I think that's workable. I think they both play. It becomes tough. Harris had 2 touchdowns last week, but only 9 carries. Hard to kind of go on that count. Before we get down to the 5,000s, who do you like here in this kind of 6,000 range? I think in the Rams-Niners game, Sony Michel and Eli Mitchell are both exactly 6,000. Those are plays. Like there's a lot of guys in this range I think are pretty playable.
Yeah, me too. Sony Michel, I don't want to. Okay, it worries me that Cam Akers is back.
Yeah, that's true.
So
good point.
There's been some positive talk too. Like McVay, said he looks great. It's unclear how much he's going to be involved, but it seems like he's going to play some. So I'm going to be off Sony Michel for that reason. I briefly mentioned Devin Singletary before. Yep. I do like Singletary. This spot against the Jets is just one we've tried to target most weeks. So I have interest in Singletary. And then, the Patriots, if Harris was out, would really like Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, he's 5,900. That's I think a lot of people go to that if Harris is out. I think he looks really good when he plays.
Yeah, he does. He does look really good. And the New England running game is like, it's great. You want a piece of it, but you don't want to do it when all their guys are healthy. And then
how do you feel? How do you feel about Rashad Penny? I mean, that's 3 out of 4 games. Not only good, over 135 yards, and the last week was monsters. 25 for 170 and 2 touchdowns against. Granted, it's Detroit, but this guy 3 out of 4 games has been huge.
Yeah, and that's just such a sore spot for me. I'm still kicking myself from last week. I ruined so many of my good lineups in the afternoon slate last week by rostering Swift over Penny for the same salary and rostering whoever else over Penny. So I get it. He looked really good. I can see going back to Penny. Like I don't know if it's going to be the greatest game script if they go down to Arizona.
That's fair.
But I get it. But it'll probably be tough for me to get there. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you like Penny again this week?
Man, he sure passes the eye test right now. He actually looks really good. I think the game script thing you mentioned is an important point. I think they're 6.5-point underdogs to Arizona, so that matters. I mean, Seattle's a team that if they have the lead, they just run the heck out of the ball. They do anyway, but if they're down the second half, I think they let Russ go throw the ball to Metcalf and Lockett. But Elijah Mitchell's the guy that is a little bit tough for me. He's 6,000. Came back off the injury last week and boom, 21 carries, 2 catches. Like they just used him. Everybody's like, oh, they're not going to really feed him. And every time he's healthy, which has not been often, they do feed him. Like he's the guy. And I watch that team a lot. They are a different offense when Mitchell's in there compared to Jeff Wilson or JaMychal Hasty or whoever else it may be. Trey Sermon hasn't played in forever, but he definitely has a boost in the spark to that offense that the other guys don't have. They used him out of the backfield for a touchdown passing this week. Really nice play drawn up for Lance to get him the ball. The Rams are good versus the run, though. That 3.7 yards per carry. When they played last time, Mitchell had 27 carries, only 91 yards. Like, that still is, good yardage, but didn't score. But like, that's obviously a bad yards per carry. The Rams are tough that way. For me, it's just, I think I need, if Lance played, I think I'm a little more interested. I think I like that aspect of, them having to like at least keep a spy on Lance and kind of opens things up for Mitchell. If Garoppolo plays, I think they'll feed Mitchell a lot, but I worry a lot about the Rams kind of stacking the box and making Jimmy kind of try to beat them with the pass. So I think I'm a little more interested in him with Lance than without Lance. What about under 6,000? We talked a lot about Dante Foreman at 5,700. I think we both like him a lot in this spot. Who else do you like in the 5,000s? There's like Samaje Perine's playing for Cincy, but like I think that offense is going to be a mess. Who else do you like running back wise? Kind of maybe guys that maybe are getting a shot that don't normally get one.
Yeah. So I've seen people talking about Samaje Perine. We mentioned at the start that might be a game to just stay away from. It's tough to be too confident. Like I think it'd be a mistake to just assume that Samaje Perine steps into the Joe Mixon role. Yeah. I can't see that. They're going to use all their running backs, I would assume. Yeah, this range is tough. I'll mention this guy. It's really, really crazy to mention Rex Burkhead at 5,200.
Hey, he's been getting volume.
Yeah, 6 targets last week, even 2. And he's got a couple incentives in play. He 103 total yards away from a bonus. He's going to reach a playing time bonus too if he sees like 30% of the snaps. I mean, don't have to worry about that. He will see that. Yeah. But I could see going to Burkhead. I mean, he's getting all the usage there, and if he's going to catch passes too, that looks decent. I don't know. I'll let you tell me about a cheap guy. I was just looking back and considering Penny. He absolutely smashed Detroit last week, but this was the Lions at home. The week before against Chicago, he benefited big time from the weather and the snow. And his other good game was against the Texans, who I think you earlier mentioned have the 32nd ranked run defense or defensive line or whatever it was. So basically,
he's crushed some really good matchups. It's a good point.
So I'm not saying like this is. I'm not saying don't play him or whatever, but just at least consider the spots that he's succeeded in, and now a salary increase at Arizona in a game that they probably won't be controlling. I mean, I was reading some stat about the Seahawks have run considerably fewer plays than like all their opponents, and I'd assume Arizona, controls the game for the most part. But if
I think
Seattle gets up.
I think it's a really good point too, because his price is up, but he's still going to be popular in 3 out of 4 really games I mentioned. But like finding guys that are going to be popular that you have a really good reason to not play. I mean, that's a big part of doing this and picking the right lineups. It's a really good point on who he's played and who he's beaten and how the games have worked out. It's some good stuff there.
Okay, so tell me. Give me a couple cheap guys, Scott, or one cheap guy that you like in that 5K range, or even cheaper.
Yeah, I think if James Conner sits, that Chase Edmonds in this game is interesting. He's 5,800, but it's the targets. Like if Conner doesn't play, they just throw the ball to him a lot. He has 15 targets the last 2 weeks. He had 6 again last week. He was only 1853 running it. He was 5 for 29 on targets. But like Seattle's defense, they're better against the run. They're 3.7 yards per carry against the run. So they're pretty good against the run, struggling against the pass. But I think Edmonds just be so heavily involved and getting touches that I in a game that's the highest total in the game, if I can get a running back under 6,000, if Connor does, I would need Connor not to play, and he was limited again. I think going to Edmonds makes a lot of sense in a game that Arizona's got to win. Below that, I think it's tough. I think there's enough guys in the low 6s that I don't really need to jump down. If you want to go with Keyshawn Vaughn, he's 5,300 for Tampa. Like he's going to play a bunch. It sounds like Ronald Jones is not going to play. Obviously, Leonard Fournette is out, but like I just don't trust the situation very much. Dare Ogunbowale, you just wanted me to say his name. He scored last week. Didn't do a lot because Jacksonville got smoked, but he had a late, he had a kind of a screen patch in garbage time that kind of saved people who played him. He's 5,200 against Indy. Another game where they should be down. It's hard to see them really running the ball, but like he's in. He's got the volume. I don't love the range down here. You know, for a situation where we usually get week 18, like guys aren't playing, you get some spots. I think if Antonio Gibson does not play, that Jared Patterson becomes interesting. He's 5,300. Looked pretty good last week. He was 12-57 a touchdown. Also had a 541 on 5 targets catching the ball. I think Gibson's going to play, so that kind of goes out the window. If for some reason he has a setback or becomes inactive or can't make it, the Giants are 26th in rushing points per game again. So I think that that's a good spot, but it would need Gibson not to play. I would have a ton of interest in Chase Edmonds. I agree if James Conner is out. In that Tampa Bay situation, if you really want to take a flyer, so Ronald Jones is going to be out. I don't know about Keyshawn Vaughn, but I could see Le'Veon Bell sort of being the main back for Tampa in a game that doesn't mean anything. He played 26 snaps last week or something like that. Like it's just we can't get rid ourselves of Le'Veon Bell for some reason.
No, and I mean, if they're you could see in a meaningless game, if they're not playing, if I don't know, it could be a spot for Bell. I'm not going to do it, but I guess worth mentioning after he caught 3 passes and played 26 snaps, and now Jones is going to be out, and Antonio Brown's going to be out, and who knows if Evans and Gronk, what's going to happen there. So it just might be a game where a scrub like Le'Veon can see all the work.
Couple of comments in the chat. Brandon mentioned in the chat, I think Seattle has a chance to win this game. I do too. I think it's going to be a back and forth game. I think that Seattle has found a little bit of kind of their old offense the last few weeks here. I think you can win this game too. And Brandon has a question for you. Trey Lance or Taysom Hill for a large field GPP if you had to pick one? Obviously, assuming Garoppolo's inactive.
Taysom or Lance?
Yeah.
I think Taysom's safer. Lance would be more of a leverage option. I'm going to be going with Taysom myself in a few GPPs, so I guess that'll be my recommendation. Cool. I've found a couple of these might be meaningless stats about the Seattle-Arizona game, but when they played earlier in the season, the Cardinals ran 30 more plays than the Seahawks.
Damn.
This is kind of crazy. The Seahawks have only ran more plays than their opponent in 2 of 16 games this season.
That is wild.
Just, again, it's another thing of why I would worry about Penny. Unless they get a lead, though. I agree with what you said and what the commenter said about Seahawks do have a chance to win this game. And in that case, it would be a nice script for Penny if they can get an early lead. But there is also some reasons to be wary.
Yeah, I think the intriguing part of that game is the fact that there is could be a little back and forth, and Seattle has a chance there and could score some points. So that's
Sorry, back to that guy. His question about Lance or Taysom.
Yep.
Both those guys, it's tough to know who to pair them with. I'd like to ask him more questions like, is he planning to play them naked? Is he planning to pair them with somebody? You don't really want to. At least I don't really want to spend $8,500 for Debo. If Trey Lance is in there, it just feels like it's going to be hard to pay off that salary. Taysom Hill, I kind of like pairing him. I kind of like Taysom more because his receiving options are cheaper. You mentioned Marquez Callaway before, and I agree with you. Callaway is intriguing after 10 targets. He has big play upside too. And just anyone on that team, you could pair Taysom with the tight end. They're all under 3K. They have some 3K receivers too, especially if Traquan Smith's out again. If Traquan's out, I think those New Orleans receivers are interesting. I just think it's a little, I guess, it's uncertain what to do with Lance. If you're going to play Lance naked, though, I'm okay with that. I just don't know if I want to play him with other 49ers.
I think they're so close that I look at it and I see one guy's playing Atlanta and one guy's playing the Rams, and give me the guy playing Atlanta.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, and I think Lance has a ton of upside in a large field GPP. If you want to throw him out there, I think it could work. But like, if you're going to ask me to pick one of them, and that's the question was, I got to go with Hill just based on the match.
Yeah, me too.
Let's get into some receivers here. We talked about running backs, but first a note from our sponsors at Skybox Sports. Skybox Sports Network is your hardcore source for odds and sports tickers. Skybox Sports has been creating entertainment and relevant products for restaurants, sports bars, casinos, racing sports books, arenas, and stadiums for years. Now you can bring a little bit of Vegas into your fan cave. Skybox's low-cost and state-of-the-art Wi-Fi platforms is simple and affordable plug, play, and activate format. Skybox Sports Tickers brings you live odds, propositions, fantasy scores, hires, fires, trades, breaking news, and recaps with in-depth coverage for the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, NASCAR, UFC, specialty events, and more. Visit skyboxsportsnetwork.com and use promo code RotoWire5 for a 5% discount off your order. So we've kind of hit quarterbacks and running backs, and we've mentioned some tight ends. I want to talk a little bit about receivers real quick before we jump out of here. In the mid-range, there are a ton of receivers. A.J. Brown is popular this week at 7,000 against Houston. We've got the Seattle guys, Metcalf 6,900, Tyler Lockett 6,400. Everybody's hero, Amon-Ra St. Brown, is 6,800. In that game we talked about last week, he worked really well as the run back to the Seattle stacks. Brandon Cook, 6,300. We talked about McLaurin earlier at 6,200. Who do you like in the 6,000s? It seems like there's a ton of options here, and picking between them could be pretty big in figuring out who wins these events.
Yeah, there's a ton of options and mostly good options. So I don't know that you can necessarily go wrong with most of these guys. I feel pretty comfortable with, Amon-Ra first. It's actually should be a decent spot for Detroit. That spread keeps moving in their favor. You can't see Rodgers and Adams and a lot of the important starters playing past halftime. Who knows? They might not even play past the first quarter. Amon-Ra has seen double-digit targets in 5 straight games now. You'd think he for sure sees that again. So I feel pretty good there. Same with Brandon Cooks. We've talked about Davis Mills for a couple weeks straight now. He continues to look good. Cooks caught 7 balls in 3 straight games. I like going back to Cooks and Christian Kirk as well. I'd be comfortable with in that game with the highest total. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good range this week. We have so many games, but like a lot of guys just concentrated here. A.J. Brown, I've seen, has been popular. I worry a little about A.J. Brown about how much they need to throw. Like last week, they didn't need to throw again. Like against the Niners, that game was kind of close and back and forth. They threw a lot. The Niners can't guard anybody. We've covered that sufficiently. But he had 5 targets like again last week, 2 for 41. Like I love A.J. Brown as a player, but I just worry about how much they throw. And this is a week against Houston where they can just hand the ball off and be fine. If Houston sticks around, sure. But if not, I just worry at the price tag. He's 7,000. A, they could not throw the ball a ton. B, like if they get up in this game, they got to win. They got the 1 seed. If they're up big in this game and they got it locked up, like he's going to sit in the fourth quarter. He's going to sit the last 20 minutes of this game. And I just don't think I'm going to do it this week. He's got a lot of upside. He could do really well against this defense, but I just think there's enough in here that concerns me about that. So he's a popular one that I'm actually going to be fading this week. St. Brown, everything I agree with everything you said. I can't argue against that at all. He's got a quarterback proof, which is wild. Like even with Tim Boyle, Amon-Ra St. Brown's been really good. Yep. I love Brandon Cooks again. We talked about Brandon Cooks a lot last week. I loved him, had him on a lot of lineups. He was 7 for 66 and a touchdown against the Niners. Like not huge, but definitely got there for you. Had 11 targets, double-digit targets in 3 straight weeks. He missed week 16, but the 3 weeks he played in. Great game script for them. We just talked about the Tennessee side. Like they may get up in this game. You got to figure that Davis Mills is going to be throwing the ball the entire second half to try and play against Tennessee. So I like that a lot. We mentioned McLaurin. We mentioned Christian Kirk, guys I like also. The other guy in this range I really like, we kind of touched on a little bit, is Tyler Lockett at 6,400. Arizona really struggles against slot wide receivers. They've allowed 15 touchdowns to slot receivers, which leads the NFL. So I like him more than Metcalf this week. Also $500 cheaper. He was 4 for 115 against Arizona in week 11. He's got a lot of down games. I think he has 7 games with under 35 receiving yards, which seems crazy for Tyler Lockett. But when he has big low up games, they can be pretty big. So I do like Lockett a lot this week, and I think he gets lost a little bit in with Cooks and all these guys in here. I think that you get him a pretty nice percentage too.
Yeah, that's really good points. I'm with you on the A.J. Brown fade too. Love him as a player. He's popping in projections that I've seen, but this feels like a Dante Foreman game. And I mean, even if if Tennessee gets up early, there's a really good chance that Brown's going to bust. Yeah, everything you said, I couldn't agree more.
Before we get into the really cheap wide receivers, we kind of already mentioned a few of them. What about this like mid-range, like say 4,500 to 6,000? We've talked about Chase Claypool already, so I think that's pretty clear. Is there anybody else that you like in this range? There's some Brandon Ayuk is 5,600. KJ Osborne has scored the last 2 weeks for Minnesota without Adam Thielen. He's 5,500. Who do you find yourself kind of liking in this range?
I kind of like DJ Moore. I'm okay with going back to DJ Moore. Yeah, I was on him last week. Definitely let me down. This spot against Tampa Bay is one that's been good this season. They should have to throw. He should see 10 targets again. I saw some stat. DJ Moore leads the league in, I don't know what you call the stat, but quarterbacks missing open receivers or something. He's got
that sounds about it. That's all right. Someone who loves DJ Moore has had him on a lot of season-long teams. This has been a frustrating year of just horrendous quarterback play in Carolina. Yeah.
But I'm okay. Like 5,800 is a decent salary. And I mean, if
that stat needs a name, by the way. It's a stat that we need a name for.
I should have. It had something better than what I said, but yeah, I wouldn't mind going back there. Tampa Bay, we know you can't really run on them. Carolina is likely to be losing and passing for most of the game. I can see DJ Moore going for 100 and a touch here. Who do you like in this 5K range?
Well, we already mentioned Marquez Callaway. I really like him at 5,000. The only other guy in this range that we haven't talked about I do like is Rashad Bateman is a little bit interesting to me. He's 4,900. Obviously a really talented guy, 4,900. But the Baltimore pass game's been weird. Tyler Huntley's been good, but like not a lot of deep plays. We talked about Marquise Brown a bunch during the season. Like it's a lot of targets, but no production. But Bateman's a cheap enough 4,900. He had 10 targets last week. He's 758. He's really talented guys, some explosiveness there. I think this is a game that we talked about. Baltimore needs to win. Like I know 9 million things need to happen for them to get in, but like you got to figure they're going to play until they don't need to. So I do like Bateman. The Pittsburgh defense doesn't scare me a ton these days. So I think he's playable in there. I prefer Callaway and Claypool though, so it might be hard for me to get to him in a lot of lineups.
Yep.
What about under like 4,500? We've already talked about Ray McLeod. I think 3,800 is a really good play. Ben is going to pepper him with some targets. Anytime you get targets for a guy that's that cheap, you got to go there. We talked about Cyril Grayson at 4,500. We talked about Antoine Wesley at 4,100. Is there anybody else down here? I mean, that's 3 guys already. So that's pretty good. Was there anybody else out here you're considering yourself playing?
Yeah, I don't think so, but I guess it wouldn't be a podcast if we didn't bring up these Jacksonville guys.
You're not gonna let me talk about Laquan Treadwell for the 500th straight week?
I will this time. I mean, he did well last week, 6 catches for 87 yards. They're cheap. Him and Marvin Jones. One of them should have a good game. No James Robinson, so I can understand that. But like you said, when Ray McLeod and these other guys, I don't know that I'll necessarily need to look for someone else. I guess in like a large field GPP or like a spot that maybe a Saints guy. I don't know though. Traquan would have to be out to like maybe take a shot on, I don't know, Deontay Harris or Lil Jordan Humphrey. I don't know though. The other guys are just in much better spots and should see much bigger volume. Is there anyone, I don't know, is there anyone I'm missing? You got anybody?
Yeah. I mean, that's 4 options under 4,500. That's a lot for 1 week. But I will say with Treadwell, we kind of joke about Jacksonville receivers, but that's 6 straight weeks where Treadwell has 4+ catches and 50+ yards. Like that's a lot of production and really consistent production for someone who's priced out here. He has not scored, which is why the price has stayed low, but like he gets in the end zone and suddenly he's a guy that's really, really good. So I think I would put him in the range with those other 3 guys. I think he is in that range rather than kind of tier below them. I think there's 4 for me. It's Treadwell, Grayson, Wesley, and McLeod. I think they're all super playable and really good guys that can save you some money and get you kind of up to the Taylor or Cup, whoever you want to play there. What about tight end? We've kind of hit on some guys. We've kind of moved along here. We talked about Zach Ertz. We both like him at the price. He's 5,300. And the expensive guys. You mentioned Gronk. We're talking about Week 18 heroes for all the compensation he could gain from some targets he could hit. He's 6,300. Kittle is 6,700. Mark Andrews has been great all year, 7,500. Kittle is really good historically against the Rams. He was 5 for 50 and a touchdown, 7 targets in week 7. He's played them the last 7 times he's played them. He has 90 plus yards in 5 of those 7. He's been really good against them. He matched up well. He's been pretty down. He has 3 for 50 the last 2 weeks after those 3 huge games. I think he's a guy. We talked about maybe some guys that are better with Lance. I think Kittle's definitely better with Jimmy Garoppolo. I think Garoppolo looks to him. They have plays where he really feeds Kittle. So 6,700 is expensive, but I think of the 3 in this top range, he'd be my play of the 3 guys.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, and that Jimmy has to play for me to roster Kittle.
Me too. I mean, Lance had one nice completion in last week, but it was clear that it's just that the outside of the field is playable when Lance is playing. They throw the ball outside the numbers, whereas Garoppolo, everything is in the middle of the field. Everything is inside the numbers. They very rarely throw to the perimeter with him. So I think game plan wise, the way they run plays, the way Jimmy looks for him, and Kittle just matches with Jimmy better right now.
The one thing, Mark Andrews, so 7,500, that looks crazy for Mark Andrews. Definitely,
you're gonna go with yardage target here, aren't you?
Well, he has that. Yeah, he can set the single season record for tight ends. But even besides that, he's crushing. He's been crushing, and no one's going to play him at that salary. And this Baltimore-Pittsburgh game might not be that bad of a game. Like we mentioned at the start, rivalry game, both teams kind of playing for something still. Pittsburgh's been a good target. Huntley's good play at quarterback. You want to pair him with someone. I mean, these numbers on Andrews are crazy. So, I mean, if he's not going to be that popular because his price tag's big now, I think it makes sense for tournaments for sure.
We always talk about this tight end has more than 50 yards in all these games. Andrews has over 85 yards in 4 straight games. We're talking about huge numbers, and he works with Huntley. He works with Lamar. I mean, he's been good with Huntley, so there's not an issue there with the quarterback difference there. I agree with you. I think that 7,500, nobody's going to really play him with the way everything else lines up, and there's so many guys in the mid and expensive range this week. He's going to be low percentage, and I mean, he's been awesome.
Huge numbers, 85 over 85 in the last 4, but over 115 in 3 out of the last 4. Yeah, I mean, just crazy for a tight end. And he's 143 yards to break the single season record. So there it is. 143 yards to break the single season tight end record for receiving yards. So looking a little bit lower. Worth mentioning Freiermuth because Deontay Johnson is out. He did see 6 targets, caught 5 balls last week. Should see a bunch of targets again with Deontay out. Looking cheaper. John Bates for $3K maybe. I don't know. You got anybody down here?
I mean, you mentioned Cole Comet. I think that 3,400. I think a lot of people will go there. He hasn't scored all year. I figure they get him a touchdown at some point. It's crazy he hasn't scored all year. Does have 19 targets the last 3 weeks, 13 catches, so he's involved in the offense right now. I think with Dalton, that's fine too. I think Tyler Higbee at 4,000 is playable. He had 9 targets last week. I think Stafford, as he's struggled, maybe he's kind of limited the outside stuff and kind of look for Higbee a little bit. 15 targets the last 2 weeks. I think he's just a nice cheap part of this game. If you wanted to go Niners and Rams and kind of think both teams need to play, they go back and forth a little bit. I think the Higbee works at 4,000. So Komet and Higbee, probably the guys I'd go cheaper, and I'd probably try and get up to Ertz at 5,200 if I could. 9 more targets last week, 33 targets last week. He's been heavily involved in that offense. I'd probably try and get there, but if I couldn't get there, it'd be Higbee or Komet for me.
I agree. There's not much to like in the cheap range at tight end. I try to get up to Ertz. But I think those Komet's playable. I like Higbee too. Yeah.
Before we get out of here, we got to talk defense a little bit. I've been good on defense all year and then failed miserably last week. I played Miami at 2,800. I really liked that matchup, but they got absolutely blitzed. They had turnovers. They had sacks. None of it worked. Tennessee killed them. So it's my first real big whiff on defense in a while. But where are you going with defense this week? I think that, with guys sitting, there's all kinds of different options. I think you mentioned earlier, we don't like Browns and Cincinnati, but maybe the defenses. So what do you do with defense this week?
Yeah, I think the obvious one is probably Browns 2,600 at home to the Bengals, who are going to be starting Brandon Allen, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So, Bengals starting their backups, no Joe Mixon, no Joe Burrow, probably going to rest their receivers too. I always, I never mind starting Myles Garrett and company against anyone really, much less a backup quarterback, and 2,600 at home. So, I mean, Browns seem like sort of the easy pick for the cash defense, at least in cash games. For tournaments, or maybe looking a little more expensive, I kind of like I don't know, I kind of like Washington. It's hard to say because they're Washington and a lot of their best players are out, but it's a matchup.
Giants' offense is a disaster.
Oh yeah, I mean the Bears feasted on them last week. Sort of every defense has been crushing the Giants recently, so I don't mind going there. I don't know. Give me a couple picks because I also got crushed with the Dolphins last week.
I've got 3 in the low 3s that are I mean, Cleveland is pretty obvious. You need the money. I think that's a way to go. I do like Washington, like you mentioned, they're 3,100. I think Tennessee is playable at 3,300 against Houston. They have multiple sacks in 5 straight games. They forced multiple turnovers in 3 of 4. Davis Mills has been playing pretty well, but I think it's a good spot. The one that I like is 3,400. I really like New Orleans this week against Atlanta. New Orleans has to win. They're going to look up at that scoreboard. If the Niners get way up, sure, but I don't think the Niners are blowing out the Rams. I know they did the first time, but the Saints are going to play the whole game. They had 7 sacks last week. They have 17 sacks the last 4 weeks. The Saints are getting after the quarterback right now. Their offense is kind of a mess, but their defense is playing well. The Falcons have allowed 11 sacks the last 3 weeks. They allowed 5 last week. And this is a game where Matt Ryan's going to get hit a ton. I think the Saints have 3, 4, 5 sacks. Matt Ryan might start to force some stuff. If I had to pick a team to get a pick 6 in a game this week, it'd be the Saints for me. I think the sacks are there. I think the turnover upside's there. I think the low points are probably there. I like everything about this defense. I think 3,400 is a really good price and high enough where not they don't stick out as so obvious. I think they won't be that popular. I love the Saints week. They're my favorite defense to play by a pretty good margin, actually.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. Saints, they just have a great defense overall.
And you got to win against a team that just wants to get the heck out of there. I love the chance for them to really, really stick it to the Atlanta offense.
Agreed.
So that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I think that you could go. I mean, Buffalo and the Colts have really good matchups too. The Bills are 3,700 against the Jets. The Colts are 3,800 against Jacksonville. You play both of those. They're a little bit more expensive, and I tend to not go that high. But I think Saints is where I'm at. But anybody else you want to talk about? Someone else in the chat asked about can you rank the teams to avoid due to starter sitting? I think we kind of covered that earlier. But obviously Cincinnati, Green Bay, and then Buffalo and Tennessee, if they get ahead, were kind of the ones that I was thinking of. And then, teams you think they're going to blow somebody out, that they win and in, and maybe you said, that's Buffalo and Tennessee. Green Bay has nothing to gain, and obviously Cincinnati has already said they're sitting starters. Those will be the ones for me, kind of the automatic avoid. Any other player or thing? Anything else you got, Ryan? Before we jump out of here.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
It kind of hit it all. We were pretty good hitting all the positions and all the roster or all the salary spots too.
Yeah, nice. Beautiful. I think we hit most of it. Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for listening, and thanks everybody for listening all season. I know it's been a long season with the extra week here, but we've really enjoyed kind of talking DFS with you every week. Hopefully, it's been positive for your cash flow. Also, we've hit a lot of good plays. Hopefully, that's helped you out. We will be doing the next 2 weeks. We're gonna do the first 2 weeks of the NFL playoffs because there's a lot of games. There's 7 games on the slate next week, so we'll definitely do that one. And I think divisional week. As long as Ryan sticks around, we're going to do the 4-game slate on that one also. So thanks everybody for listening to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. Thanks to WynnBET for their sponsorship of us all year long. Other than that, if you want to follow Ryan on Twitter, he is RyanBelongia. I am at Scott Jenstad, Jenstad. Hit us up with questions there. Kind of if coaches sit their guys or there's more injuries, definitely hit us up. We'll kind of adjust as we go along for the news the next couple of days. Other than that, hope everybody has a great last week of the season. Take care. We'll be back at you for the playoffs next week.
Thanks, Scott.